and welcome to Axumawian Media. My name is Melat Haptu and I'll be hosting Inside Tigray, a show that will give you a Tigrayan perspective on global, continental and statewide affairs. Please tune in, listen, engage and participate for an insightful and constructive discussion. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We've got Dr. Selam Kidane today. She is a lecturer in psychology in the University of West London. She has also worked heavily with refugees and unaccompanied refugee children with a specific focus on the impacts of war and displacement trauma. She's also an outspoken human rights advocate and has been vocal about the human rights violations both in Eritrea and in Tigray. Dr. Selam, thank you so much for joining us today. It's much appreciated. Thank you for taking some time out to have a conversation with us today.
Thank you for your invitation, Melat, and your colleagues as well. It's both an honor and a privilege to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Selam. Okay, so I think let's just begin with kind of you telling us about, it's kind of the kind of situation that we're in today. You as an Eritrean, someone who's been advocating for the human rights violations that have occurred in Eritrea. And in the last couple of years, in the last 2 years, the genocide that has unfolded on the people of Tigray. There's so many limitations and difficulties in terms of being able to bring these kind of issues to light because of the oppression there is back home. But you've been very an outspoken advocate for both issues, which is very commendable. And what do you kind of think currently is the state of the average Eritrean residing in Eritrea? What are some of the psychological kind of issues they face in terms of the kind of society they live in?
Right. As you say, it's very difficult to begin to comprehensively describe what is going on. It's not as it just such an understood phenomena, and often a misunderstood phenomena, but also it's a situation that puts the average Eritrean, as you say, in a constant dissonance of not knowing where they are, not being sure whether that constant feeling of being gaslighted and not then not ever knowing the reality of what's happening, the reality of what's going on. So it's been a deliberate derailing of the Eritrean society. So the human rights violations that have been fully detailed in a lot of documentations as a result of the work that my colleagues and myself have done over the years in reporting, highlighting, detailing every bit of violation, starting with the indefinite national service, the religious persecution, the severe curb on freedom of expression, freedom of association, name it, every freedom going, the number of disappearances, the number of unlawful killings, the arrest of the top officials, the disappearance, not even the arrest, the disappearance of the top officials, the fact that that Parliament hasn't met since 2002. Don't know if you were born in 2002, Melat. So it's the lifetime of a lot of the young people that are currently activists in the field. So it's by this point we don't just have a dictatorship in Eritrea. Well, we do have a dictatorship, but I think it's a bit more than that. I call it pathocracy. So we have got such a diseased system in Eritrea that everything has been contaminated, and the net effect, to put it in a very mild format, is the fact that the average Eritrean doesn't know whether they're coming or going when it comes to big issues, because there's lack of information, and then there is lack of or there has been a persistent gaslighting, derailing of people's morality that they don't often trust or even understand what they're feeling, what is going on for them, much less to protest against it. So what the outside world sees is the fact that Eritreans are silently putting up with it, but what we from the Eritrean communities see is the level of helplessness, hopelessness, and also confusion that there is.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned it, but how has forced conscription or indefinite service, how has this played a role in this, in creating that psychological kind of makeup of the kind of state that you're speaking of? How has that contributed?
Okay. One of the ways, obviously, there is the more of us that are looking at it, the more comprehensive the picture would be. I've got the very limited view of being a psychologist, a psychotherapist, and someone who has understood trauma from the perspectives of how it has unfolded in Eritrea. So how the national service, in my perspective, has affected Eritreans is, you must remember that the indefinite national service in Eritrea has been going on since 1994. So definitely way before you were born. So the people who started off the national service, who entered the first round, are people my age, and my own children are adults now. So that's how long it has gone. So for this long, since 1994, every Eritrean young person has had a lot of uncertainties, but one certainty, which is the indefinite national service. So when you go into the national service, you are denied the opportunity to make choices. So to make choices about where you're going to study, what you're going to study, where you're going to live, how often you get to see your family, how you practice your religion, what political views you're going to have, whether or not you're going to own a mobile phone in your name that has got your name on it, to get that contractual agreement. So it is a violation on every level. So, to the point of who you are. And this is at the age of 17. So your final year of high school is Axumawian. And from that point onwards, it's like everything about you is determined by the government, basically. And so it has given the government an opportunity to socially engineer. So it has given the system that I told you about, the disease, the pathocracy, to socially engineer an entire generation of Eritreans to do its bidding for it. And so you've got a situation where a number of people have been rendered so impotent that they are unable to effect anything for themselves, starting from something as simple as being there for their family, all the way to having political opinions and having a say in how their country is run. So this is a generation of young people that have been made so important. So that's how it has affected individuals. Then you can multiply that by 3 million to see what it has done to the whole country. So it has meant that a number of people haven't been able to go into professions that they would have liked to go. A number of people haven't been able to set up the businesses that they wanted to set up. A number of people haven't had the kind of family that they wanted to have. So you can multiply the consequences of that. So that's the kind of impact that it has had, whilst it has given the government almost a free rein to use these people as they see fit. The only people that have got the initiative and the almost the daring, the courage to escape this are the ones that have become refugees.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, the condition seems very dire there, and has been, like you said, for a long time. And I mean, this is something that's widely known about the secrecy to kind of to be, the secrecy of the society, so that many people cannot actually get viable information to expose some of the human rights violations and the kind of limitations there are in accessing a lot of the parts of Eritrea, so that people can actually go see for themselves about what's going on. Reporters can report the kind of lack of freedom there is. And clearly that has allowed the current system to stay in place for a very long time. And I think the lack of the interest of, for example, the international community to deal with such a system, do you think that's one of the main reasons, the fact that the Eritrean issue, the lack of freedom of the Eritrean people, the masses of human rights violations within Eritrea itself, the fact that that was ignored by international actors, do you feel like that has impacted the current, the violations that the Eritrean army is being, and the Eritrean government is being accused of in Tigray today?
I am not sure I understand the latter part of your question, so
Yeah, so the lack of engagement by the international actors such as the US, the EU, to actually solve the Eritrean problem, has that transpired into what we see today happening in Tigray by the Eritrean army? The fact that it's been left for so long.
Definitely. I mean, by the violations that have occurred, the heinous violations that have occurred in Tigray, have exposed what has been going on inside Eritrea for so long. So for Eritreans, the tragedy of Tigray was actually a wake-up call. Well, should have been a wake-up call, because all the things that we were told, we imagined it, or we're exaggerating, or that we are that it can't be that bad. In Tigray, it was seen that it actually not just that bad; it's worse. It's worse than that bad. So so that they had the world heard Eritreans when we said what was going on, when we told the world what was going on, when the UN actually acknowledged that that violations against humanity were occurring, human rights crimes were crimes against humanity were occurring in Eritrea in 2016. Had we been heard then, I don't think what happened in Tigray would have transpired. In fact, to the contrary of what we had expected, in 2018, the person that should have been taken to international court for crimes against humanity, Isaias Afewerki, was actually rehabilitated and celebrated for his contributions to peace in Ethiopia.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the irony of it. The fact that the so-called peace that actually gained Prime Minister Abiy a Nobel Peace Prize was actually part of the reason why it was, that a lot of people were kind of not able to see what was coming because it was done in the name of peace, wasn't it? In the name of peace, where both the Eritrean government and the Ethiopian government collaborated in committing this genocide on Tigray. So speaking of the lack of strategy, for example, taken by international actors on Eritrea, in the recent piece by Michael Rubin on national interest, you might have seen it, he kind of speaks about the interference of the Eritrean government in the region. So not just in Tigray, but in Sudan and in Djibouti and in Somalia. And these kind of interferences by the Eritrean government, he states, will cause further regional instability. And do you believe it's a regional interest for international actors to be able to actually once and for all deal with the Eritrean issue? And if so, what do you suggest are the first steps that need to be taken?
That is very difficult because, I mean, when I say it's very difficult, it's mainly because that's the 2 million question. What should we do about Eritrea? And essentially, Eritrea is when we talk about the Eritrean government, the first step that people should start correcting and understanding is the fact that there's no systems in Eritrea. There isn't even a semblance of government. As I said earlier on, there's no functional parliament. Parliament doesn't exist in Eritrea. It hasn't met since 2002, so to all intents and purposes, it has stopped existing. We don't even have the nominal minister of cabinets that used to meet from time to time a while back. 2-3 years back, that used to be the case, but we don't even have that anymore. A lot of people have, even during the during the war in Tigray, quite a number of people had died as a result of mysterious circumstances. A lot of top officials, top generals, and what have you. And so there isn't anything to say that a government of Eritrea exists. So the first step that everybody should understand is the fact that when we talk about the government, we're effectively talking about Isaias Afewerki. We're not talking about anybody else, anything else. So we need to have that clarity. So we're talking about what should we do about Isaias Afewerki. And then the second thing that must be understood again is the fact that internally, Isaias Afewerki is our problem. It's Eritrea's problem. We as Eritreans should take up our responsibility in challenging and dealing with Isaias Afewerki. I am not under any illusion that somebody else would do that for us. And if he's a problem to us, it's our problem. We made him who he is, basically, by not challenging him, by allotting him all the power that he has, which he is abusing. However, Isaias Afewerki has made himself a problem to Tigray, a problem to the rest of Ethiopia, a problem, as you say, to Somalia, Sudan, even Yemen, and everywhere else. So when it comes to the regional situations, the regional issues, yes, Isaias Afewerki becomes a collective problem to all of us. So it needs to be taken in that context. People shouldn't use. We in Eritrea shouldn't use this as, yes, he's a problem to all of us, so can you come and get rid of him for us? No, that's our problem. And also, I don't want Tigrayans or anybody else to think, oh, he's a problem to you as well. So it shouldn't be like that. Isaias Afewerki became a problem in Ethiopia as a result of the kind of access he was given by Abiy Ahmed. Right? So Ethiopians should effectively take Abiy Ahmed to task over that. Right? So we need to recognize what is within our jurisdiction, respectively, and then only after that, deal with the the principled issues. What went wrong in Tigray? What was so gut-wrenching in Tigray was the short-termism that was occurring. How Ethiopians thought they could, they could solicit the services, the cruelty of Isaias Afewerki for the purposes of managing the Tigray situation that they thought they had, and how Eritreans thought that, even well-meaning Eritreans thought that there could be some advantage to Eritrea in that, with the Bademe issue, and everybody trampled all over their principles with this short-termist approach to it. Nothing in the world happens like that. Least of all, the respect for humanity and the respect for human rights doesn't happen by usurping, by soliciting the services of one of the most heinous violators of human rights in the region. So I'm saying that we should go at it from there's 2 or 3 layers of things that we ought to do. The first one being each nation, each group of people, each country has to take their own responsibility when it comes to their internal issues. So that including us Eritreans. And then regionally, we can think jointly that, what are the principles here? What should be honored and maintained? And what are the red lights that we should never cross? So that the whole region is more cohesive. And it's this, the enemy of my enemy can also be my enemy kind of thinking that we need, or the friend of my enemy is not necessarily or that sort of thinking. The enemy of my enemy is not necessarily my friend. So we need to think logically. We also need to think based on principles.
Yeah. So what I would touch on from what you said is, for example, taking Isaias Afewerki as the sole leader of Eritrea, for example, because he is the only person who actually has any reign on power in Eritrea. And then, you said that he's an internal issue for Eritrea, and we have to stop this this culture of my enemy and your enemy. Let's attack them together. That kind of concept. But the reason why I touched upon, for example, some of the trauma that the Eritreans within Eritrea face, because these are the ones that are conscripted into joining the army, etc. Because the nature of the crimes, for example, committed in Tigray, show that there has been mass kind of indoctrination of a type of resentment or hostility towards Tigrayans. So, and this has come down on a level where the army was very right in a manner that was very widespread, inflicting kind of almost hate crimes. So, and this is something obviously that was done at the hands of Isaias Afewerki. But is the lack of being able to deal with the Eritrean trauma, the lack of being able to deal with some of the psychological issues that the people face currently, is this the reason why we are facing such heinous crimes in Tigray? Not just because of Isaias Afewerki's leadership, but because of the years and years of indoctrination against Tigrayans that has been felt in the Eritrean society.
Well, as with anything that has got to do with the wide society, it's very difficult to pinpoint it, and least of all, it's very difficult to pinpoint it to an event, just one event. What I would say is there's a lot of trauma in the region, not just in Eritrea, but a lot of it in Eritrea, definitely, and but elsewhere as well. And the key is to have a proper approach to it and have reconciliation, peace building efforts like being focused on, which has never happened in the region. Like after the border conflict, the Bademe war, there has never been. We went on to the no war, no peace policy, and there has never been a proper reconciliation or peace building. Even when the peace deal in 2018, the Sham peace deal was signed, it was the same. That these issues were left unaddressed, untackled, and that kind of leaves the region and the people of the region with open wounds that anyone can come and exploit. So the open wound that was left, I'll give you a quick example, for instance, on this. I was born and raised in Addis. And in the 1998 war, not my immediate family, but definitely my in-laws and a lot of my friends' families and everybody was deported. Everybody that I grew up with, lots of people were deported, and this issue, although some steps were taken, legal steps were taken to reinstitute the property, some of the properties of these people, but the issue was never addressed in a way that not just restores some justice, but also that acknowledges the pain and the difficulties that were caused, the trauma that was caused as well. And so when this time round, the Eritrean regime, Isaias Afewerki, wanted to perpetrate something, then it was there. This was a ready-made tool that was already there for propaganda use. And there are other incidences. The no war, no peace policy that went on for over 20 years was another one where it was just there because it was never dealt with properly. So the political elites on both sides, sometimes I feel they leave kind of this booby traps almost for us, for the people that they can use, and that's one of the things that made me want to come on the side of Tigrayans and want to stand alongside that, because I don't want anyone in the coming years to think, oh, all Eritreans were against us at that time. And we really must accountability and accounting for the crimes, the heinous crimes, as you say, have happened. Is there's no alternatives to that. We have to do that, but at the same time, we really need to see how we were made to come into this, how our sentiments or our unhealed wounds, our violated senses were used against our better senses to perpetrate crimes against Tigrayans. And so, and if we continue this, if it's not done now, if Tigrayans don't take the time and the effort to understand this and come to some restitution, the next step will be 10 years time, Tigrayans would be doing the same thing to Eritreans. And then another 10 years, Eritreans would be doing the same thing. And it's not in our interest, and it's only in the interest of people who want to perhaps want to use that to maintain themselves in power or for other purposes, but it's never in the interest. Left to their own resources, left to their own good sensibilities, the people of Tigray and the people of Eritrea would be doing what we saw them doing in, is it 2018 or 2019 when the borders opened in Zalambesa? And a few weeks before that, I was in the region. I was on the Merab Bridge. I was in Rama, and I saw how people wanted it to be with my own eyes, but without proper mechanisms for that, it will always be used for indoctrination, the kind of indoctrination that you mentioned.
Yeah. So there's a tendency now, I think, especially after the Pretoria Agreement, to almost create a sense of collaboration between Ethiopia, the Ethiopian government, and the regional government of Tigray. And almost, even from the Ethiopian politics, to point fingers at Eritrea. To say Eritrea is, behind everything. Eritrea is the one that did this and that, and almost kind of slowly backing away from accountability as the gatekeeper of the borders, which is the federal government, as the gatekeepers of the borders for lacking in what they had to do in terms of protecting their citizens. In fact, like you said, they almost they viewed the Eritrean manpower as hired help. So what is your perspective on this? What is the need to almost for the Ethiopian government to kind of step away from this and put Eritrea as the perpetrator rather than taking accountability for actually allowing Eritrea to come in and commit some of the crimes that it did?
Yeah, I mean, and I really think it's one of my concerns as well. You've rightly put it. I see quite a lot of that. In fact, I was discussing that yesterday with a friend of mine, and I was saying that how should I put it? I was saying that without accountability, we would be in this same quagmire. The victim and the perpetrator may change, but the situation would be the same. We would have the heinous crimes again, and anybody that worries, is concerned about the region, should actually be mindful of the fact that this needs to be dealt with properly, not just to find an scapegoat. In this case, it might be Isaias Afewerki. I mean, I have got no sympathy for Isaias Afewerki, so it's not because I want to defend him that I'm saying this, but it needs to be dealt with properly. Every life matters, and every Tigrayan life matters, and it's my hope that Tigrayans would not succumb to the easy reach, like temporary feel good type approach, but go for justice, and by justice and accountability. I don't think it will absolve or lessen Isaias Afewerki's crimes if we also look at other perpetrators. Including if there has been even anything to answer for on the Tigrayan side as well, because it's only by addressing all of those crimes that we will come to restitution, and we will come to peace and reconciliation as well. And that is the only thing that would guarantee us an escape from this cyclical violence.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of looking forward into the type of relationship or the kind of solidarity that can be formulated between the people of Tigray and the people of Eritrea, what form do you think this can take? What kind of relations can they have going forward, and what kind of relations do they have presently? And do you think that there is something that could be worked on? I'm sure there are limitations, but what do you think are the things that we need to address in terms of priority?
I think the first thing that we need to do is, as people, the people of Eritrea and the people of Tigray and the rest of Ethiopia as well, we need to have clarity over who we are, all of us. And I for one, am against this notion that either blurs any differences or creates artificial differences. We're not the people of the region. We're not that different, particularly the highlands of Eritrea and Tigray. What's the difference? The lowlands of Eritrea and Sudan. So there is a lot of scope. This is our richness. That this is the opportunity that we've got. That we can have access to all of these resources, all of these markets, all of this know-how, all of these experiences and expertise. We need to own this. This is our resources. This is our heritage as people of the region. And so we need to use this to develop. So a research that is done, for instance, in Meghalaya University should be applicable equally, be it malaria or whatever is going on when the locust issue was going on in terms of agricultural things. We should use those similarities, and we should take it away from the realms of always being held hostage by this artificial differences that people tend to create. The kind of there's a lot of differences. There's nothing. We are, and by we I mean as an Eritrean. Eritrea is made up of the highlands and the lowlands. Eritrea is made up of our Muslim brothers and the rest of us. Eritrea is made up of all the languages and what have you. So all of us, we have got our stakes and our interests as Eritreans should be, our best interest is in a cohesive and peaceful region. And similarly in Tigray, similarly in Ethiopia, we shouldn't be held hostage by this politicking of our identity, where people would make us the same when they want to, and make us so different when they don't want us to, exploit the little community-wide or society-wide animosities and make them big and make us go to war. And then when they don't want us to go to war, diminish them so much that we hardly know who we are anymore. It shouldn't be like that. It should be, we are two people. We're the same people who live in two countries. And we need to accept that, celebrate that, acknowledge that, pay tribute to the culture that has enabled us to do that, to live cohesively, and start living up to those standards.
Yeah. I think those are very positive and very kind of great steps to take, I think, for us to even start acknowledging what the gaps are, and then to try to not focus on the gaps as such, but also recognize them, but be comfortable with them as well, and to create that cohesive environment that you're speaking of. It's really important that you said we have to recognize our differences, but we also have to recognize our similarities. It cannot just be one or the other. I think that's very important. So I think going forward, there's a lot of opposition that has maybe regained some strength, like you mentioned earlier, in the last 2 years because of the amount of evidence of what was coming out from Tigray, which the Eritrean army was being accused of. There was a lot of, Eritrean opposition, and that seemed to have gained strength. How do you think that will be moving forward? Do you think that this is the start of a very strong generation of Eritreans who have evidence to say, this is what the army is doing, this is what our army is doing, therefore we need to act on it? Or is it simply just a sentimental kind of reaction to what had occurred in Tigray?
Whichever way you look at it, we can't escape from the fact that heinous crimes have been committed in Tigray, and our collective, be it just collective Eritrean or collective region, our collective interest, long-term interest, lies in accountability for that. And more specifically for Eritreans, we can run, but we cannot hide. These things happened in broad daylight. We can acknowledge them, learn from them, and collaborate with the region to stop them from happening again, or we can bury our head in the sand and continue to be victims of the crimes that are continuing to be perpetrated inside Eritrea, and also continue to watch as more crimes are committed elsewhere as well. So I really hope, although I don't know, it's still early days and it's very difficult to say which way things will fall, but I, for one, would be fighting for accountability and justice for as long as it takes.
Thank you, Dr. Selam. That has been a very insightful discussion, and thanks for opening up and telling us about some of your worries and some of your concerns, as well as some of the hopes that you have for the relation between the Ethiopians, Tigrayans, and Eritreans. I think it's really important that we start thinking of steps on what can solve some of the wounds that we've got today, and how can we stop this being a never-ending cycle? How can we stop this being a never-ending cycle where the next generation does not have to go to war? The next generation does not have to be victims of genocide and so on. And I think it's really important that we start to acknowledge what has happened and start to actively take steps for accountability, and also for to build bridges as well. So I think that's very important. Thank you so much, Dr. Selam. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I think discussions like this are very important to take us even kind of an inch forward to where we need to be.
Definitely. Thank you. And thank you for all our viewers today. That will be all. This is our stay with Dr. Selam, and hopefully we'll have you back another time.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Thanks. Thank you for watching Insight Tigray. We will be back next time with more topics and more guests.